red cherry shrimp can double the size of their colony within just a few months. But why do some people end up with a thriving shrimp colony while others can't get a single baby shrimp to survive? If you've struggled to breed cherry shrimp, then don't worry. In this video, I'm going to show you how to set yourself and your colony up for guaranteed success. Stick around, because I'm also going to share with you the number one mistake new shrimp breeders make that mean their colonies just don't grow. Hello friends, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Richard and I'm the author of the best-selling shrimp book on Amazon. So if we're going to successfully breed our cherry shrimp, it's absolutely crucial that we go back to basics and we start at the very start. And that is with the tank. Now, it doesn't matter to the shrimp what size tank you keep them in. They literally couldn't care less. But what they do care about is how stable their water is. And the larger tank you have, the larger volume of water you keep your shrimp in, the easier it is to maintain stable water parameters. And don't worry about water parameters at this stage, we'll come to those later on. Essentially, keeping 10 gallons of water stable is easier than keeping 5 gallons. Keeping 20 gallons is easier than keeping 10 gallons. If you want to build a large, colourful colony of cherry shrimp, then go for the largest tank that your budget and space will allow. Once you've decided what tank to go for, the next thing you need to consider is substrate. Now, when it comes to keeping and breeding cherry shrimp, they don't care what substrate you use. You don't need special substrate for your cherry shrimp. You can use sand, you can use gravel, you can use fluval stratum. You can essentially use pretty much any substrate on the market. You can use a cheap substrate like play sand or pool filter sand, or you can go for something more elaborate, more expensive. Much like with the tank, go for whatever makes sense for your tank and your budget. Certainly in my experience, when it comes to breeding shrimp, having a substrate is better than having a bare bottom tank. I've tried both over the years and I've always had more success with some sort of substrate than I have when I went bare bottomed. So don't get bogged down on which substrate you choose. The number of shrimp you breed won't be determined by which substrate you use. Don't spend a fortune on something expensive and elaborate. Pick something you like the look of, pick something that fits your budget and go for it. Now, once you've chosen your breeding tank and you've decided what substrate to use, the next thing you need to decide is how you're going to decorate it. And Rich, why does decoration make any difference to the number of shrimp you breed? Well, when the shrimp are born, when the female kicks those eggs and releases the babies, for the first few weeks of their life, pretty much the only thing they're going to be interested in is algae and biofilm. Algae and biofilm are crucial to breeding shrimp and to raising baby shrimp. Now, the more things you have in your tank, the more rocks or pieces of wood or whatever decorations you choose, the more of those you have in your tank, the greater surface area there is for bacteria and biofilm and algae to develop on. And I know so many hobbyists hear the word algae, they go, oh, algae's bad, I don't want algae, algae's horrible. Algae is absolutely crucial when it comes to raising baby shrimp. In my experience, the very best breeding tanks I have lots of rocks, they have pieces of wood, they have as much surface area as possible for algae and bacteria and biofilm to develop on. In my snowball breeding tank, I've got a large piece of wood in there. That's absolutely superb for providing surface area for that algae and bacteria to develop on. And this colony that started off with just 12 snowball shrimp a few weeks ago is absolutely booming, has already hit the 50-odd shrimp mark, and I've got buried females, meaning that number's going to escalate in no time at all. Now, I put live plants in all of my shrimp breeding tanks, and there are essentially 3 reasons I do that. First of all, the plant leaves themselves provide more surface for bacteria and algae and biofilm to develop on. And bear in mind, we want these tanks to look nice, but these aren't planted display tanks. It doesn't matter that the tops of this plant has algae growing on it. That is only beneficial to our shrimp and our baby shrimp. The second reason I like to add lots of live plants is they provide cover, and cover gives the shrimp that feeling of safety, of security. I think shrimp know they're pretty much at the bottom of the food chain, and they don't know they're not in the wild. They don't know there are no predators about to come along. As far as they're concerned, they're constantly on the lookout for the next thing that's going to come along and try and eat them. By putting lots of live plants in there, you give them cover, you give them hiding places, and those things give them that feeling of security. And when they feel safe and secure, they're far more likely to breed. Again, I've had far more success over the years in shrimp breeding tanks with lots and lots of live plants than I have where I just have a glass box with pretty much nothing in it. These days, I would never consider a shrimp breeding tank without lots of live plants. And the third reason we want to make sure there are lots of live plants is as those plants grow, they actually suck ammonia and nitrite and nitrate and heavy metals and other bad things out of the water, meaning your water is cleaner and safer and healthier for the shrimp. This tank, certainly in theory, is a healthier, cleaner environment for the shrimp to live in than exactly the same tank without the plants. Plants are nature's filter, and even though in here I am running a sponge filter, those plants are doing a lot of the heavy lifting, making that water much nicer for those shrimp to live in. Now, it essentially doesn't matter which plants you go for. Don't get bogged down spending hours choosing which plants. In a shrimp breeding tank, just add some plants. If you really don't know what to add Java moss. Choose some crypts, some cryptocoryne plants. Add some hygrophillas. There are so many plants out there that are easy to grow, don't need any special lights or any special CO2, and your shrimp will really appreciate having them added to the breeding tank. So the final thing we need to consider in our breeding tank is what equipment we're going to use. Are we going to use a filter? Are we going to use a heater? Do we need a light? Well, if we're growing plants, then yes, you will need a light. I just use basically budget LED lighting. In my experience, there is no need to buy high-end special lights that are going to cost you hundreds of dollars if you're just wanting a breeding tank. Yes, if you're into your aquascape and you're trying to build these elaborate, stunning looking tanks. If you're an aspiring George farmer, then yes, going for special lighting will probably make the difference. But in a shrimp breeding tank that just has some easy to grow plants, any LED light will do the job for you. Now, we do need to give some consideration to filtering. And I'm not going to, in today's video, go over whether or not we need a filter, why we need a filter, etc. I've done videos on those. Those are best saved for another day. What I am going to say is, in my experience, when it comes to breeding shrimp, a sponge filter is superior to a hang-on-back or a canister filter. And why do I say that? Hang-on-back filters and canister filters are typically fairly powerful. They have an intake tube that comes into the aquarium with a strainer over the bottom. Those strainers are amazing for preventing fish from getting sucked into the filter. They're absolutely atrocious at preventing baby shrimp from being sucked in. You'd be astonished at how many people I speak to who say, Rich, I've had these shrimp for a while, I'm doing everything right, why am I getting no babies? When I look at their tank or when we talk through the setup, they're running the most fantastic hang-on-back filter. They're running a wonderful canister filter. Their setup is amazing, but I can almost guarantee them that every time a baby shrimp goes near that intake pipe, it gets sucked up into the filter where it typically will perish. If you are going to run a filter on your shrimp breeding tank, then you want to either A, go for a sponge filter, or if you already have a hang-on-back filter or a canister filter you want to use, make sure you put an intake sponge over that intake to prevent the babies from being sucked up. In this red cherry shrimp breeding tank here, I am running a small hang-on-back filter, but I do have a sponge over the intake to prevent the babies from getting sucked in. So once we've chosen our tank and we've worked out how we're going to set it up, we need to give some consideration to water parameters. But before we do, this year I'm working hard to release 1 or 2 shrimp keeping videos every single week. So if you want to up your shrimp keeping game, if you want to become a better shrimp keeper, and you think you might enjoy 1 or 2 shrimp keeping videos every single week, then why not subscribe to the channel? So water parameters often prove to be a stumbling block for new hobbyists. They feel like this big worry for anyone who's new to the hobby. I don't know about parameters, I don't know what to do. The key takeaway from this video should be red cherry shrimp are incredibly hardy, incredibly adaptable. They can live in a wide range of parameters, and in a minute I will give you a band for each of the major parameters. But the key thing to remember is your red cherry shrimp don't need to be at this specific parameter or that specific parameter. What they want is for whatever parameter your water is at to remain more or less stable. If you're keeping your red cherry shrimp at 6.8 pH, they'll be absolutely fine. If you're keeping them at 8.2 pH, they'll be absolutely fine. What they don't want to do is to live in a tank that goes from 6.8 to 7.4, back down to 6.5, up to 8, swinging all over the place. It's our responsibility as hobbyists to make sure the water parameters remain as stable as possible. So let's look at the first of these parameters, which is water temperature. Now, our cherry shrimp can live in a really wide band of temperatures, anywhere from 57 to 86 Fahrenheit, which is about 14 to 30 degrees Celsius. Within that band, your cherry shrimp are not going to care where your tank sits. What they want is for if your tank sits at 62, for it to remain in and around 62. If it sits at 82, they want it to remain in and around 82. Now that might mean the best way for you to do that is to add an aquarium heater. I'm often asked, do shrimp need an aquarium heater? And the answer is, it depends. Can you keep your water temperature stable without a heater? Then no, they don't need one. If you can't keep it stable without a heater, then add a heater. Set it to whatever temperature you feel is appropriate, and the heater will more or less keep it within that band. Don't get bogged down on thinking, oh, mine's 68, it needs to be 72. How am I going to do this? I'll adjust it, I'll change it, I'll fiddle about with it. Your cherry shrimp will be quite happy at 68 if you keep them in and around 68. Don't allow yourself to become obsessed by any of the parameters in this video. After temperature, we need to consider pH. And if you're really new to water parameters and you're not sure exactly what pH is a measure of how acidic or alkaline your aquarium water is. And shrimp really want to be somewhere in the range of 6.5 to 8.5. And again, they can probably go slightly outside of that. As with temperature, it doesn't really matter what pH your water is. Your shrimp just want it to remain more or less stable. So when you set up your aquarium, get yourself a good test kit, get either some test strips or a liquid test kit. Find out what your pH is, find out the pH of your source water, your tap water, and then do your best to keep that pH stable. And the best way to do that is to stop mucking about with the tank once you've set it up. Once you've set your shrimp tank up, don't just randomly do water changes. Don't just, every 3 days, every week, once a fortnight, I change half the water. That is what will lead to your pH swinging, as well as many of the other parameters. Set your tank up and essentially, unless something's gone wrong, unless you've got an ammonia spike or extremely high nitrates, or you're getting random shrimp deaths, don't change water, leave them be, and that will help keep your pH and your other parameters stable. So after temperature and pH, the next most important parameters we need to worry about are your general hardness and your carbonate hardness. And those two often are confused as being the same thing. The general hardness is the measure of the calcium and magnesium ions that are in your water. And that essentially is just a scientific way of saying how hard or soft is your water. Now, our cherry shrimp want their water to essentially be 6 degrees of general hardness or higher, or 110 parts per million or higher. Again, as with pH, get yourself a test kit. Many test strips will measure pH and GH and KH. Most of the liquid test kits do too. Measure what is your GH, what is your KH, and then if you need to, adjust it. You can buffer it up using things like crushed coral or Wonder Shell. And as with the other parameters, your main job here is to try and keep that stable. And the best way to do that is to not carry out random water changes. The best way to keep your KH and your GH stable is once you've set your tank up, once you've made any adjustments you need to bring that GH or that KH up, is to leave it alone. If you're constantly changing water, drain it down, fill it up with tap water, add some more, whatever, drain it down, fill it up. The KH, the GH, the pH, the temperature can all swing around, and that is what your shrimp hate. Shrimp love stability. Now, the final parameter you might hear people banding around is TDS, which stands for Total Dissolved Solids. When it comes to setting up your cherry shrimp breeding tank, the most important thing you need to know about TDS is stop worrying about TDS. TDS is the most pointless measurement in our hobby. You'll constantly see videos where people sticking a TDS pen in the thing going, it's 120. It's 207. TDS stands for Total Dissolved Solids, and that means everything that is dissolved in your water. Yes, the TDS pen can be used to measure the amount of calcium or magnesium in your water, but it will also read dechlorinator. It will read if you've got plant fertilizer. It will read if you've got ammonia in your tank. A TDS pen, TDS reading is designed for when you're setting up a brand new tank, perhaps a tank for Caridina shrimp, and you've got RO water and you have to remineralize that water for your Caridina shrimp. That is what your TDS pen is designed for. It's not designed to just randomly go, oh look, 200 TDS. That tells you nothing. My best advice I can give to you when it comes to TDS is never bother measuring TDS unless you are specifically remineralizing RO water. Okay, so now we've got our tank set up, substrate, plants, rocks, wood, water. We know our parameters. We're happy. The next thing we need to add, and this is probably the biggest mistake new shrimp keepers and new shrimp breeders make, the next thing we need to do with this tank is leave it alone. Give it time. So often, new hobbyists will set up their tank and within a few days, they're chucking their shrimp in. A week or so later, all of those shrimp have died. For our shrimp to thrive, for our colony to grow and expand and be colorful, for our babies to survive and to grow up and to produce their own babies, we need biofilm, algae, and naturally occurring bacteria. And those things come through time. In my opinion, when you set up a new shrimp tank, you want to give that tank at least 3 or 4 weeks. And if you can wait 4 to 6 weeks before you add the shrimp, you're almost guaranteed for success. When you start to see algae growing in that tank, when you start to see evidence that the plants are developing new leaves and growing, at that stage, you know life is thriving in that tank and it's the perfect environment to start adding your shrimp. The quickest way for you to kill your new colony of shrimp is to set up the tank, chuck the shrimp in. They don't stand a chance. So once you've set up your tank, just give it time. And I know this is the hardest part, especially if this is your first or only tank. Now, oddly, I'm the kind of person that will quite happily sit and stare into a tank with nothing in it. I've been known to stare into tanks that don't even have water in them, but that's just me. It can be hard. It can be incredibly frustrating. Your significant other will say, why have we got this tank and we've got nothing in it? Give it time and your shrimp will pay you back with dividends over the coming years when the colony grows and grows and grows. Don't make that number one mistake new shrimp keepers make. So we've given our new tank time. It's all set up, it's thriving, there's algae growing, we know we're gonna have bacteria and biofilm. Now is the time to add our shrimp. The shrimp we add now are the foundations for our future colony. So we want to find the healthiest, the best, the healthiest, most colorful shrimp we can. At this stage, we might want to invest a little bit of money in getting some real good quality shrimp. Now, I'm not talking about buying sort of Bloody Mary shrimp instead of just some nice bright cherry shrimp. I'm talking about finding someone who sells good quality shrimp, someone who knows their stuff, someone that's happy when you make an inquiry, they're happy to give you advice and time. It can be tricky tracking down good shrimp breeders or stores that have good quality shrimp. But spending that time now and buying a decent colony now, you're far more likely to have success in the future than if you just find the cheapest person you can. You find this cheap person that sells them $1 a shrimp, whatever it might be. They've got loads, they're giving them away. If you start with a bad colony, you're going to struggle to build a good, healthy colony over time. Now, in terms of ratios, you really want to try and get yourself 1 male for every 2 or 3 females. In my experience, the 1-to-3 ratio is absolute key to a healthy, growing colony of shrimp. And if you found yourself a good breeder, if you found yourself a store that really knows its stuff, they shouldn't have any trouble at all in picking out the males and the females. And do bear in mind, the males are typically less colorful than the females. So don't feel like the store or the breeder is trying to pull the wool over your eyes. They're trying to fob me off with those 3 not very colorful ones. I only want the bright red colorful ones. I only want the dark blue, deep blue ones. I don't want any of these slightly lighter ones. You have to have a mix of males and females. If you buy yourself a colony of 10 or 15 females, if you insist on only picking out the brightest, most colorful shrimp, the chances are you'll end up with an all-female colony and that colony will not grow. A year or 2 ago, I went to a store and they only had 9 orange reedy shrimp. So I took all 9. I was unfortunate. I got home, put them all in the tank, and all 9 were female. And needless to say, of course I couldn't find any more, could I? That colony petered out over time. Find a breeder you can trust, find a store you can trust, tell them what you're trying to do, and let them help you by picking out the right combination of males and females so you can build a thriving colony. So now we've got our tank. It's all set up. The plants are doing well. The rocks are getting bits of algae on them. We've given it time. We've chosen our colony. We've added our shrimp. What do we do next? And the next thing we need to do is to feed our shrimp a good quality, balanced diet. So many people, they'll contact me and say, Rich, I'm not getting any babies. My colony is not doing well. What's going wrong? Okay, we have the conversation. We're talking it through. We get to the point where we say, what are you feeding your shrimp and how often? I don't feed my shrimp. They're scavengers. They're cleanup crew. It's their job to eat the algae and stuff. And whilst they are scavengers, whilst they are a great cleanup crew, if you want your colony to grow, if you want your colony to become big and colourful and healthy, then you do need to target feed your shrimp. Now, I'm a bit extreme. I feed pellets. I feed flakes. I feed bloodworm. I feed rapashi. I add snowflake. I add blanched vegetables and nettle leaves. I am extreme. I probably feed my shrimp maybe up to 10 different foods. What you might need to do is to get 1 or 2 different foods. Maybe you have a shrimp pellet and maybe you give them frozen bloodworm. And maybe you feed them 2 or 3 times a week and you vary it accordingly. One day you give them pellets, the next day some frozen bloodworm. Maybe at the end of the week you give them a cube of rapashi. Maybe you've got other tanks where you've got flake food and you get some of that flake and you crush it between finger and thumb and you spread it around your tank. You don't want to overfeed your shrimp, but you do need to make sure the shrimp eat. In my opinion, as a hobby, we generally underfeed our cherry shrimp. And in my experience, in fact, I've run experiments in the past. I ran an experiment where I added crushed powdered food every day to my shrimp tank, and that population absolutely exploded. Now, I wouldn't recommend feeding your shrimp every day, because if you overfeed your shrimp, you could create an ammonia spike. You may pollute your water. You could kill your shrimp. But under controlled conditions, I made my colony absolutely boom by feeding them every single day. If you want your colony to grow, if you want your colony to look amazing, then make sure you feed your shrimp on a regular basis and feed them something decent. Don't expect them to get by scavenging what they can find, because there's only so much algae, there's only so much detritus, there's only so much stuff they can scavenge, which will limit the size of your population. Your shrimp population will essentially grow to the amount of available food for the colony. Okay, so what now? Our tank is up and running, our shrimp are in, we've got our feeding schedule dialed in. What do we do now? How are we going to take this glass box of 10, 20, 30 shrimp and turn it into a colony of 1, 2, or 300? Well, the next thing to do is just leave them alone. Stop mucking about with the tank. Don't constantly spend time adjusting the filter, playing with the heater, moving some plants around, adding a rock, taking a rock out, water changing, tweaking the light. Set your shrimp tank up. If you set your shrimp breeding tank up as per how I've described in this video, you don't need to do anything. Yes, you will occasionally need to top up the water as water evaporates. Yes, you will need to occasionally clean the front glass of algae so you can enjoy your shrimp. Don't clean the sides, don't clean the rock and the wood, etc. Clean the front glass so you can enjoy your shrimp. If you end up with an ammonia spike for some reason, or you suddenly have shrimp dying and you test the water and it's bad, then yes, then you carry out a water change. But if you want that colony to grow, if you want to produce lots and lots of babies, leave them alone. Let them do their thing. Enjoy them, of course. I sit here for hours looking at my shrimp, enjoying them. But I don't spend hours mucking about with the tanks. The more you muck about, the less stable that tank is, the less likely your shrimp are to thrive and the less likely they are to breed. So the key stage next is leave your shrimp alone and enjoy them. Now, if everything has gone right up to this stage and you've followed the advice in this video, over the next 30 to 50 days, you will probably see your first baby shrimp. Now, to give a quick overview of the whole process of shrimp producing babies, they will start with the females. You'll notice behind the female's head, you'll notice a yellow patch, a golden saddle as it is often referred to. And that is the eggs developing inside the female's body. Once those eggs as those eggs mature, they pass down her body. And when they're ready for her to essentially release them, she will molt. She will pull herself out of her old skin and she'll have a fresh, slightly softer skin underneath. Now, once she does this, once she molts, she gives off some sort of a lovely, sweet smelling pheromone. And the male shrimp will zoom around that tank looking for her. When a male finds that mature female after she's molted, he will fertilize those eggs. She will pass those eggs down under her body, and she will hold those eggs beneath her body for around 30 days whilst they develop. And you may have heard people refer to a buried female. And a buried female means a female who's holding a clutch of eggs below her body. Now, once those eggs have fully matured and they're ready to hatch, essentially, she gives them a sharp kick and the baby shrimp are released. And at that point, they're out to fend for themselves. The female takes no further parental care in those babies. And this takes us back to having cover. This takes us back to having places for algae and biofilm to develop. Because when those babies come out for the first week or two, maybe 3, they will barely move. They will stay more or less in one place and they will consume the algae, the biofilm, little bits of food that have floated around and settled. That is their start to life. That is what they will consume as they grow and molt and become large enough to move around the tank. And within a few months, those babies will have grown to the point where they are ready to breed, which essentially means within 6 to 8 months of starting with a colony, you should have several generations of shrimp in there that are breeding. And the more generations you have, the more shrimp you have, the larger and faster your colony will grow. It essentially has the snowball effect. Rolling the snowball down the hill, it starts off very small and not really got much momentum, but the further it gets, the bigger it grows, the faster it rolls, the larger your shrimp colony will grow. Now, of course, the more babies you have, the bigger your colony grows, the greater the chances that some of those shrimp won't be the quality or the grade of shrimp that you want. You don't want the color quality of your colony to degrade over time. So you will need to know how to fix that problem. And to learn how to fix that problem, watch this video next. Thanks for watching.